Hi, I'm Ken Beaulieu, host of the Beyond Profit podcast. I've had the good fortune of interviewing many great guests, from marketers to authors to nonprofit leaders. In this collection of sound bites from the podcast, guests weigh in on how to define a brand's purpose or reason for being beyond profit. Enjoy.
I guess what I try to explain is that purpose is a brand's North Star. It is the thing that should be guiding everything that the brand does and should explain to all of the people that are associated with the brand, either within the organization or with their suppliers and partners or with the ultimate end consumer, why the brand exists, why the brand has a right to exist, and the role and the contribution that that brand wants to make in the wider world. It's not so easy, and yet in some respects you could argue that it's quite straightforward. What makes it challenging is that we try to help clients find a purpose that is both organic and ambitious, and that could be perceived as an oxymoron, right? The organic part is nice because, as you've seen, a lot of the conversations that are taking place around Nike and, whether Nike was right to go out and take a strong stand around, taking the knee, etc. You can have a debate about whether that was a good idea or a bad idea, but it's always going to come back to what the brand has the cred to say and what is authentic to the brand's history and the brand's beliefs. So we always start in this process with going internal and we do these things called storytelling circles. We do something we call brand therapy. We're trying to get at what's real, what's authentic, gets people coming to work in the morning. Where has this business or this brand come from? That is the point of departure that ensures that whatever purpose we come up with is truly organic and authentic for the business and for the brand. After we do that, then it becomes a bit more challenging because that could be a lot of things, right? Like for Dove, you could argue that brand was always about naturalness. It was always about having authentic testimonials. It was always about 1/4 cleansing cream, right? So you're going to have like a range of possibilities. And then you need to do more work to figure out how can we actually pressure test the different options within the purpose to get us to something that is going to be ambitious and future-facing. And that's when we overlay what we call the 5 lenses. The internal one is the first, but the other 4 are consumers, culture, competition, and future. So consumers is understanding, what they need, what they want, what they believe about the brand, and really getting under their skin to find a deep human insight. The culture one is super interesting because that's about understanding what is going on out in wider society, what sort of tensions are taking place in culture and society that the brand has a right, that has permission to tap into and to try to resolve. And that is a super important one that I think a lot of our clients didn't initially recognize the role that this cultural tension played in getting to a great purpose. The competition one is one that is interesting in terms of a debate because you could argue, who cares what competition is doing? Like when you're coming up with your purpose, it's about what's right for your brand and your business. And I think that's a legitimate argument. I also think that it's useful to know what the other brands in your category, or even for some of the big multinational brands in the wider world, are talking about and saying. Because if you can find a distinct angle on that, even if you're addressing a similar tension, there's usually a way of addressing that tension that will be unique to your brand, that will give it more of an edge and make it feel more exciting and inspiring internally, and also when that gets translated in some shape or form externally. And finally, we have a big futures and trends business within Kantar that works on macro trends and understanding where the world is going. And so we like to future-proof because you could come up with a great tension and a great purpose that's not going to be around in a year because the macro trends are shifting. Maybe not a year, but let's say 5 years. And so it's important to make sure that we are looking at a purpose that is enduring. So we triangulate all of those different pieces, first on our own, in partnership with our clients, to come up with something that really feels right and exciting.
Purpose is the reason a business exists at its highest level. It tells the story of how a company interacts through the products and services it offers its customers, how it behaves with its employees, and how it creates societal value. I'd like to think of purpose as an embodiment of a brand's ethos. But it's a statement, it's a raison d'être. In many ways, purpose is a reframed sense of corporate vision from the days of corporate identity around the turn of the millennium, when you always said a brand had a higher reason for existing. That was a 360-degree proposition.
Right.
When I think of philanthropy or social responsibility, to me, they're the ways a company brings its purpose to life. They're tools you have to make this real and not just words on a page. Some people often think of purpose as corporate values, and values are beliefs that guide behaviors. So they're different as well, but they too stem from a purpose. So purpose is the ultimate guiding principle. It's the strategic reason in its largest way that you exist.
There's a big difference between mission and purpose. Mission is what you want to achieve. Purpose is what you do for others. And so at that point, a team was assembled to say, how do we articulate what we do for others? And we came up with this statement, helping people on their path to better health. And it's actually been quite a magical statement. It's so simple. A, everyone can remember it. So that's good, because lots of people have statements that are up on a wall or in a book somewhere that nobody can remember. B, it's grand in its humbleness. Everybody can do something. Little things can help people on their path to better health, and then big things, acquisitions, but every day our interactions could do something. And so that's been really great. And then I think that the origins of the company as a retailer, where you have interactions with customers every day, has led to a real humbleness in the organization. And also care is humble, right? You're there with people every day, eye to eye level. And so that gets you very quickly to authenticity, because you realize that authenticity is what drives it. I think it's that constant connection with patients and people and consumers that keeps you authentic. And I think, having been through this a few times with different companies, what you have to be very careful of is that your own ego and your own desire to feel like you're part of something important doesn't get in the way of what you're doing for others. A lot of times, because when your own ego is involved, you start to come up with statements that are actually more goal-oriented, like help people have the best lives. It gets so superfluous that you can't ever achieve it, and therefore nobody actually cares about it. They're just like, whatever, But this one it's met the test of time. Is you ask anybody at CVS what the purpose is, and they all know it. And it's not because every day they wake up trying to learn the purpose. It's because it's so simple and it's so resonant and relevant. So in some ways, it's like marketing, the power of 8 relevant words.
I have a lot of passion. I think purpose, people get confused that purpose is cause marketing or philanthropy or what you're doing for sustainability or climate change or whatever. Those are all good things. But purpose is not a side hustle. Purpose is why you're in business. It's central to your strategy. I kind of feel like people often say, well, I'm doing the business, but I also want to do purpose because people feel it's important. They are one and the same thing. So if purpose isn't your brand strategy or your company strategy, then it's going to be short term.
I think that we're finding that founding stories matter, or founder stories matter, whether you are a new company or new to purpose. And that seems to be the place where the journey begins. Then I think it just evolves for people in terms of what they do well, what meaning do they bring into the lives of their constituents, and it's very different for all. Shareholders in particular realize that creating value for customers, investing in employees, fostering diversity and inclusion, and protecting the environment is what generates benefits for stakeholders. I recently spoke to Frank Cooper of BlackRock, and Frank Cooper is the CMO of BlackRock, and I think it's interesting because BlackRock's CEO last year came out with a statement that echoes this, that said that companies must have a purpose if they will matter to shareholders in the future. And I'm paraphrasing. However, what Frank did say was quite interesting because he feels that a definition of purpose is the fundamental reason as to why a company exists. And that drives its ultimate goal. But he also said something that I thought was quite fascinating. He said, why you exist will be the new frontier. So I think that's very interesting in light of looking at everything from shareholders and CEOs. So why you exist is the new frontier.
I think first and foremost, they need to get their brand purpose defined properly. Either I find that many times when I'm in meetings with CEOs or CMOs, the brand purpose they have in mind is not articulated very well, and it's not actionable. It's either way too lofty, or it's so basement that it's clunky and almost embarrassing. You know, like I've been in so many, I know it sounds funny, but I've been in so many meetings where the brand purpose is something to the effect of do good. I'm talking about like 100 times. What do you do with that? You need to really think deeply about what your brand or your company's focus is. Who are your people, both inside and outside? How can you do something that is meaningful to those individuals? They actually feel like you're helping them in some way. If you can't do that and you're just saying do good, it's kind of completely toothless. It doesn't do anything. So we need to find something that is allowing us to activate that purpose. And they haven't, you know, many brands haven't articulated their purpose in a way that's, we can, let's say, find ways that make it relevant inside to the employees.
My message is, if you are trying to discover your purpose, you are so far gone and so lost. And even if you miraculously discover this magic purpose floating in a beautiful glittery ball in front of you, are you truly going to sell that through and stick with it and be able to embed that deeply and intimately into your culture? I was talking to Jim Stengel about this, you know, and I think his point, which is a very, very valid one, which is coming up with a purpose is easy. Implementing it is damn hard. So my argument is, don't discover your purpose, rediscover it. You forgot your purpose. You need to remember your purpose. Your purpose existed right at the beginning. Go back to day one. Go back to your founders. You know, if Sam Walton walked up and down the aisles and spoke to people, figure out a way to do that, for example. I'm not saying Walmart doesn't have a purpose, but I'm saying that's an example. When we think about how many of these companies, I always say Hewlett, Packard, Procter & Gamble, these were real people. These were people that were hungry, scrappy entrepreneurs. And how do we get that? And I was actually very impressed and influenced by a presentation at last year's ANA, Masters of Marketing, from Denny's. CMO basically said that pretty much what I was saying now, which is we were about to go down the path and overblown consultancy, millions of dollars to take 1.5 years to discover a purpose. And then we found this, like, you know, I guess it was a slide or an old presentation or a dusty, musty, cobwebby painting, one of the first Denny's stores that says, we love to feed people. It was a quote from their founder that said, we love to feed people. That was their purpose, really loving to feed people, taking joy in being able to just see their joy over food. And who doesn't, you know, it's based on a truism, right? Do you live to eat or do you eat to live? Well, people who live to eat, those are probably a good fit with Denny's. And so that's my point. I don't have any problem with purpose, but I just think, you know, like if it's the flavor of the month and if it's being looked at so super tactically and it isn't based on the past, it's going to be short-lived.
And be sure to check out other sound bites from this series. As always, thanks for listening.